The clink of ice against crystal was the only sound that mattered in the hushed, velvet-draped dining room of Aurelia. For Ilara Vance, it was the rhythm of her life, the delicate percussion that accompanied the quiet ballet of serving the city's elite. Tonight, the rhythm was off. The air was thick with the cloying scent of expensive perfume and an arrogance so palpable it felt like a physical weight. It emanated from Table 7, from the man with a watch that cost more than her apartment and a smile that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. Julian Croft, the tech titan, the so-called visionary, the man whose face was plastered on every business magazine, heralding him as the architect of the future. His company, Ethelred Industries, was pioneering the world's first fully immersive metaverse, Ethelgard, a digital Eden for the wealthy. To Ilara, he was just Table 7, a man who had sent back his steak 3 times, each complaint more ludicrous than the last. She approached with the bottle of Chateau Margaux, a vintage so rare its price was a whisper among the staff. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice a practiced melody of deference and professionalism. "Your wine." He didn't look at her. He was scrolling through a holographic interface projected from his watch, his thumb flicking through streams of data. "Just pour it," he murmured, his voice laced with the casual dismissal of someone who had never been told no. As she tilted the bottle, a waiter carrying a teetering tray of desserts was jostled by a departing guest. He stumbled, bumping into Ilara's arm. It was a fractional movement, a tiny, unforeseen tremor in the restaurant's perfect choreography. A single ruby-red drop of the Margaux splashed onto the pristine white cuff of Julian Croft's shirt. The world stopped. The hushed whispers died. Every eye in the vicinity darted towards their table. Croft looked down at the crimson stain as if he'd been shot. He slowly raised his gaze, and for the first time he truly looked at Ilara. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no anger. They held something far worse, a chilling, analytical curiosity. He wasn't seeing a person, he was seeing a variable, a glitch in his perfectly curated evening. "Do you have any idea," he began, his voice dangerously soft, "what this is?" He gestured to the bottle. "It's the 1982 Chateau Margaux, sir," Ilara replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I am so terribly sorry. It was an accident. We will of course take care of the dry cleaning and—" He laughed. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was a sound of disbelief, of contempt. "Dry cleaning?" He picked up his wine glass and studied the deep red liquid. "This bottle is worth more than your life's earnings. That single drop on my cuff is worth more than a month of your existence." He said the word existence as if it were a foreign, distasteful object in his mouth. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pricked at Ilara's eyes. But beneath it, something else stirred. A lifetime of being polite, of smiling through condescension, of swallowing her pride for a tip, had reached its limit. "It's still just spilled wine, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The practiced melody was gone, replaced by a note of steel. "An accident, nothing more." The shift in his expression was subtle but terrifying. The analytical curiosity hardened into something solid, something absolute. He saw her now. He saw the defiance. He stood up, towering over her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You're right," he said, the soft words carrying more menace than a shout. He looked around the silent restaurant, then back at her. "It is just an accident. And you are just a waitress." He dropped his napkin onto the table. "Some things are disposable." He turned and walked out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The manager, pale and sweating, rushed over and fired Ilara on the spot. As she walked out of Aurelia, stripped of her uniform and her dignity, she had no idea that the spilled wine was not the end of the incident. It was the beginning of the complete and total annihilation of her life. Julian Croft wasn't just a man who held a grudge. He was a man who owned the system. And he was about to use it to erase a waitress from the world. The first stone to be pulled from the foundation of her life was her apartment. An eviction notice appeared on her door 3 days later, citing a litany of fabricated complaints from neighbors she'd never spoken to. Noise violations, unauthorized pets, unsanitary conditions. Her landlord, a man who had always been kind, wouldn't meet her eye. He just mumbled about a new corporate ownership policy and a zero-tolerance clause she'd never seen before. She was given 48 hours to vacate. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread. She tried to apply for a new apartment, but her application was instantly rejected. Then another, and another. A credit check revealed the reason. Her score had plummeted from a respectable 750 to a catastrophic 320. It made no sense. She had no debt, had never missed a payment in her life. The credit report was a work of fiction, listing defaulted loans from phantom companies and maxed-out credit cards she'd never owned. It was a digital ghost haunting her financial records, and it was untouchable. Her job search was just as fruitless. She was a good waitress, experienced and reliable. But every interview that seemed promising ended with a polite but firm rejection email an hour later. One sympathetic cafe owner let it slip. "I don't know what you did, kid," he'd said, looking over his shoulder. "But your online background check came back with a flag. A big one. Says you have a sealed juvenile record for aggravated assault." Ilara had never even been in a fistfight. Her past was as clean as the crystal she used to polish at Aurelia. Yet, somewhere in the vast, invisible architecture of the internet, a file now existed that branded her a violent criminal. A lie had become her truth. The most devastating blow came a week later. It was a call from the administrative office of the Glenwood Care Facility, where her mother, Sarah, was receiving round-the-clock care for her advanced multiple sclerosis. Ilara's modest waitress salary, combined with her late father's pension, had barely covered the costs. But she'd made it work. "Ms. Vance," the voice on the phone was sterile, impersonal. "There appears to be an issue with your insurance provider. They've retroactively denied all claims for the past 6 months, citing a clerical error on your initial application. You have an outstanding balance of $84,000. We need it settled within the week, or we'll have to transfer your mother to a state-run facility." Ilara's world collapsed. A state-run facility. It was a death sentence, a place of last resort where overworked staff and underfunded resources meant neglect was the standard of care. Her mother's delicate health regimen would be destroyed. She spent days on the phone, a desperate, frantic battle against automated menus and indifferent customer service agents. Her insurance company claimed her Social Security number was flagged in a federal fraud database. The Social Security Administration said her number was valid and clear. The bank that held her savings account froze her assets, citing a notification from the Department of Homeland Security. Every door she pushed was locked. Every path she took led to a dead end. She was trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare, a prison with no walls and no warden she could see. She was losing everything. Her home, her career, her reputation, and now the one person she lived for. It was too systematic, too precise, too cruel to be a coincidence. It was an attack. This wasn't bad luck. It was a demolition. Sitting on a park bench, the last of her belongings in a duffel bag at her feet, Ilara scrolled through the news on her phone. And there he was, Julian Croft, smiling on the cover of Wired magazine. The headline read, "The Architect of Reality, How Julian Croft's Ethelred Industries is Building a Better World." The article praised his company's data integration systems, their societal optimization algorithms, their ability to seamlessly manage everything from corporate logistics to personal finance and security vetting. He wasn't just building a metaverse, he had built the invisible scaffolding that ran the real world. A single drop of wine. Some things are disposable. The words echoed in her mind, no longer a simple insult, but a declaration of intent. He hadn't just gotten her fired. He was methodically, digitally, and completely erasing her existence. He was proving his point. She was a glitch he was deleting from his system. The cold dread in her stomach finally gave way to something new, something hard and hot. Rage, pure, unadulterated rage. He thought he could just delete her. He was about to find out that even a disposable glitch could learn how to write its own code. Rock Bottom had a name. It was the stale, coffee-scented air of Liam's tiny apartment. Liam Chen was the only person who hadn't turned away. A brilliant but perpetually underemployed coder she'd known since high school, he lived in a chaotic nest of monitors, tangled cables, and half-empty energy drink cans. He was a digital ghost himself, living off freelance gigs and prizing his anonymity above all else. When Ilara showed up on his doorstep, homeless and haunted, he just opened the door wider. He listened for 2 hours, his expression shifting from sympathy to focused intensity as she laid out the impossible, systematic destruction of her life. He didn't doubt her for a second. While the rest of the world saw bureaucracy, Liam saw code. He saw a pattern. "This isn't random, Ilara," he said, his fingers already flying across a keyboard, 3 different screens coming to life with scrolling lines of text. "This is an exploit, a 0 day. Not in a piece of software, but in a life, your life." "It was Croft," she whispered, the name tasting like poison. "It has to be." "Julian Croft," Liam mused, his eyes narrowed. "Ethelred Industries, that makes a terrifying amount of sense." He pulled up a complex flowchart on his main monitor. It was a web of corporate entities, data brokers, and government contracts. At the center, like a venomous spider, sat the Ethelred logo. His company doesn't just build apps, they build infrastructure. They manage the databases for credit bureaus, insurance consortiums, private security firms, even some municipal governments. They're the ones who write the rules for the digital world. And he's the king. For days they worked. Ilara, fueled by black coffee and a burning need for answers, recounted every detail. Liam dove deep into the dark corners of the web, tracing the digital footprints of her ruin. He found it buried in the metadata of the eviction notice, a routing signature that led back to an internal Ethelred server. He found a similar signature in the code of the credit bureau's website, a backdoor that allowed for manual data alteration. It was all there, a trail of breadcrumbs left by an architect so arrogant he never imagined a mouse would follow them home. He used a proprietary system called Janus, Liam explained, pointing to a string of encrypted code. It's a reputation management tool for his high-level clients. It can scrub inconvenient truths from the net, but it can also write new ones. He created a false identity for you, a shadow self with a criminal record and a bankrupt history, and then merged it with your real one. He didn't just ruin your reputation, he overwrote it. Ilara stared at the screen, at the lines of code that had become her cage. "So what do we do? We can't go to the police. He is the system. He'd just delete the report." Liam leaned back, the springs of his chair groaning in protest. He looked at Ilara, at the dark circles under her eyes and the fierce, unbroken line of her jaw. "You can't fight a king in his own castle," he said softly. "So you find the one place he feels safe. The one place he is unguarded, his private world." He swiveled his chair to the largest monitor and typed a single word. "Ethelgard." The screen filled with breathtaking images of a digital city. Gleaming spires of light pierced clouds of pure data. Holographic birds soared through canyons of chrome and glass, and avatars with perfect features strolled through lush, impossible gardens. It was beautiful, it was perfect, and it was a lie. "Ethelgard isn't just a game," Liam said, his voice low. "It's his server farm, his personal database, his command center, all hidden behind the world's most advanced VR interface. He runs his entire empire from a throne inside that world. All of Ethelred's data, every secret, every crime. It's all stored in the core of that system, in a place called the Nexus." A plan began to form in Ilara's mind, audacious and terrifying. "If I could get in there—" "You could find the proof," Liam finished, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. "You could find the original Janus command that targeted you. You could restore your life." "No," Ilara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Proof isn't enough. He'd just bury it. He'd bury us. If he can overwrite my identity in the real world, what could I do to his identity in his world?" Liam froze. He understood immediately. The Metaverse of Ethelgard wasn't just a collection of assets. For its users, especially its creator, their digital identity, their avatar, their history, their status, was everything. To be erased from Ethelgard would be a fate worse than death for a man like Croft. It would be to become a nobody. "Ilara," Liam said slowly, "his identity in Ethelgard is hard-coded to his real-world biometrics, his bank accounts, his corporate ownership. It's all one seamless profile. The system is built around a single inviolable principle. The Genesis avatar, Julian Croft, cannot be altered or deleted. He's the god of that universe. His profile is the root key. Every god has a weakness, Alara countered, her gaze fixed on the image of Croft's perfect digital city. And every key has a keyhole. You said it yourself, Liam. You can't fight a king in his castle. But I'm not going there to fight him. I'm going there to burn his castle down, with him inside it. The plan was no longer about restoration, it was about retribution. She was going to log into Julian Croft's perfect world and delete him from it. The plan was a ghost story, a digital haunting in 3 acts. Act 1, the key. Act 2, the entry. Act 3, the erasure. Liam called it Operation Damnatio Memoriae, a Roman term for the condemnation of memory, where a person was erased from all public record. It was fitting. First, they needed the key. Not a physical key, but an access credential, a way into Ethelgard's exclusive encrypted network. Legitimate entry required a biometric scan, a registered account costing a fortune, and a proprietary neural interface headset. They had none of those things. What they needed was a back door. Every system has a maintenance port, Liam explained, his apartment transformed into a war room. Diagrams and code snippets were taped to the walls, a way for developers to get in and fix things without going through the front door. Ethelred is no different. I found a deprecated service account, a ghost in the machine left over from an early beta test. Its name is Karen738. The account was dormant, but its credentials were still buried deep in the system architecture. Cracking the password was a brute force nightmare that took Liam 4 days of running his custom decryption algorithms on a network of pirated cloud servers. Ilara kept him supplied with coffee and food, watching the endless stream of failed attempts scroll across the screen, her own hope rising and falling with each one. Finally, at 3 a.m. on the 5th day, a single word flashed green on the screen. Daedalus. Icarus's father, Liam breathed, a triumphant, exhausted grin spreading across his face. The master craftsman who built the labyrinth. Croft's ego is his biggest vulnerability. Act 2 was far more dangerous, the entry. Ethelgard wasn't just software, it was tied to physical servers housed in Ethelred Tower, a fortress of black glass and steel in the heart of the city. To use the Karen account, they had to be physically connected to an internal network node, bypassing the main firewalls. There's a service junction on the 44th floor, Liam said, pointing to a blueprint he'd pulled from a municipal planning server. It's a utility closet. If you can get a hardline connection there, I can spoof your location and tunnel you in through the Karen account. The system will think you're a maintenance bot. Getting to the 44th floor of the most secure building in the city was Ilara's job. For a week she watched the tower. She learned the shift changes of the security guards, the delivery schedules, the patterns of the cleaning crews. She used the last of her hidden cash to buy a used janitorial uniform and a forged ID card. The photograph was her own, but the name was Jane Doe, an employee of a third-party cleaning contractor that Liam had inserted into their system. The night of the infiltration, her heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of her chest. Dressed in the drab grey uniform, pushing a cleaning cart filled with mops, buckets, and a concealed laptop, she walked through the service entrance. She kept her head down, her movements practiced and unremarkable. The guard barely glanced at her forged ID before waving her through. She took the service elevator, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the lift and the frantic drumming in her ears. The 44th floor was a ghost town, a sea of empty cubicles under the dim glow of emergency lighting. She found the utility closet, its door secured with a simple electronic lock. Liam had given her a small device, a signal jammer and code cycler. She held it against the panel. After a nerve-wracking 30 seconds, the light turned green with a soft click. Inside, it smelled of dust and ozone. She found the junction box, a mess of fiber optic cables. With trembling hands, she connected her laptop, the screen immediately filling with Liam's remote interface. "I'm in," he typed in their secure chat. The connection is live, but Ilara, their internal security is a beast. They call them Sentinels, AI-driven intrusion countermeasures. They'll be hunting for any anomaly. The Karen account will mask you as a low-level service program, but if you do anything out of the ordinary, anything a janitorial bot wouldn't do, they'll swarm you. You'll be a ghost, but even ghosts can be exorcised. Ilara took a deep breath. She put on the cheap, second-hand VR headset they'd modified, a clunky piece of hardware compared to the sleek Ethelred models. "I'm ready," she typed. "Send me in. Initiating connection. Remember the mission. Get to the Nexus in the Central Citadel. That's where the Genesis Avatar's core data is stored. Don't get distracted. Don't get caught. Good luck, Ilara." The world dissolved into a blinding white light. The smell of dust and the cold floor of the closet vanished, replaced by a sensation of weightless, silent falling. Then, just as suddenly, she was standing. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and blooming nightshade. She was in Ethelgard. The transition was jarring. One moment, she was huddled in a cramped, dark closet. The next, she stood on a promenade of polished obsidian under a sky filled with swirling nebulae and twin moons. The city rose around her, a breathtaking symphony of light and impossible architecture. This was Julian Croft's ego made manifest. She looked down at her hands. They weren't her own. They were simple, grey and vaguely humanoid, the default skin for a service program avatar. She had no face, no distinguishing features. She was a non-entity, exactly as planned. Other avatars glided past her, beings of light and customized perfection, their laughter like wind chimes. They didn't see her. She was part of the scenery. "Okay, you're in." Liam's voice crackled in her ear, routed through the headset's audio. It was a comforting tether to the real world. "Your objective is the Citadel. It's the massive spire in the center of the city. You can't miss it. But you can't just walk in the front door. According to the schematics, the Nexus isn't in the upper levels. It's in the foundation, the core of the system. It's a restricted area known as the Labyrinth." Ilara began to walk, her movements feeling clumsy and disconnected. She kept to the shadows, mimicking the slow, methodical path of the automated street sweepers and maintenance drones that patrolled the pristine avenues. Everything here was perfect, clean and orderly. There was no litter, no decay, no imperfection. It was sterile and soulless. As she neared the base of the Citadel, she saw them. The Sentinels. They weren't avatars. They were geometric constructs of black crystalline energy hovering silently at the entrances. They moved with an unnerving, non-Euclidean grace, their forms shifting and reforming. They were the system's immune system, and she was a virus. "The public entrance is a no-go," Liam said. "The Sentinels will scan your access level the second you approach. I'm seeing a service conduit on the north face of the tower. It's a data stream for waste management and recycling. It's not glamorous, but it should lead you straight into the lower levels, beneath their primary security grid." Ilara found the conduit, a small unmarked panel that blended into the Citadel's mirrored facade. Her service avatar had basic interaction permissions. She placed her grey hand on the panel, and it slid open, revealing a rushing river of pure data, a torrent of discarded information and deleted files flowing into the system's core for reprocessing. "I have to go." "In that?" she whispered. "Think of it as digital plumbing," Liam's voice encouraged. "It's messy, but it'll get you where you need to go. Brace yourself." She stepped through the panel. The sensation was like being thrown into a freezing, turbulent river. Raw data whipped past her, fragments of deleted conversations, discarded images, ghost-like remnants of forgotten avatars. It was a chaotic, disorienting ride. Her simple avatar flickered, struggling to maintain its integrity against the current. She fought to stay focused, to not let her consciousness be shredded by the torrent of digital noise. After what felt like an eternity, she was dumped unceremoniously into a vast, dark chamber. The river of data flowed into a colossal, humming processor at the center of the room. This was the system's underbelly. Wires thick as pythons snaked across the floor, and the air thrummed with the sound of immense power. "You're in the substructure," Liam confirmed. "You're past the first layer of security. Now for the hard part, the labyrinth. It's a maze of firewalls, encryption protocols, and active countermeasures. The Sentinels down here are older, more aggressive models. They hunt for corrupted code. Your Karen avatar is clean, but it's ancient. They'll see you as an anomaly." She moved cautiously through the cavernous halls of the substructure. The architecture here wasn't designed for beauty, it was pure function. Corridors of glowing circuitry stretched into infinity. She saw a sentinel phase through a wall ahead of her, a predator patrolling its territory. She ducked behind a server bank, holding her breath as if it could hear her. It paused, its crystalline form rotating slowly, sensing. For a terrifying moment, she thought it had found her. Then it drifted on. Liam guided her, his voice a calm presence in the storm of her anxiety. He was her navigator, seeing the labyrinth's layout through the code she was transmitting. "Turn left here. Avoid that corridor. It's a honeypot, a trap for hackers. There's a logic gate ahead. I'll feed you the answer key, but you have to input it manually." At the logic gate, a shimmering wall of energy blocked her path. A complex equation materialized in the air before her. As Liam dictated the solution, she manipulated the holographic interface with her simple grey hands. The wall dissolved. She delved deeper, past layers of security that felt like peeling an infinite onion. Each step was a risk. A single misstep, a single alert, and her avatar would be instantly quarantined and annihilated. Her connection severed. She would be trapped in that closet on the 44th floor, with Croft's real-world security closing in. Finally, she arrived. Before her was a single seamless sphere of black reflective material, about 50 feet in diameter. It floated silently in the center of a vast, empty chamber. There were no doors, no visible entrances. "This is it." Liam's voice was hushed, full of awe. "The Nexus, the core data vault. This is where he keeps his soul." "How do I get in?" Elara asked. "You don't," a new voice said. The voice was deep, resonant, and filled with an infuriatingly calm amusement. It came from everywhere at once. An avatar materialized between Elara and the Nexus. He was the opposite of her own formless grey avatar. He was a god forged from light and shadow, wearing a suit that seemed woven from starlight. His face was a perfect, chiseled replica of Julian Croft's. He looked at her, his head tilted with the same analytical curiosity she remembered from the restaurant. A service program. A ghost from the machine's earliest days. "How clever," the Croft avatar said, a slow smile spreading across his perfect face. "I must admit, I didn't think the waitress had it in her, but the labyrinth was designed to catch pests like you. Welcome to the end of the line." Sentinels began to phase into existence all around her, their black forms a stark contrast to the glowing chamber. She was surrounded, trapped. The sentinels closed in, their silence more menacing than any roar. Elara's avatar felt a crushing pressure, the system itself trying to quarantine and delete her. But Julian Croft held up a hand, and they halted their advance, hovering like patient executioners. "No, no," he said, circling her slowly. "Don't delete it just yet. I want to understand the flaw in my design. I create a perfect world, a utopia, and a piece of discarded code, a bug, finds its way to the very heart of it. Tell me, how did you do it? Who helped you?" His tone was that of a scientist examining a curious specimen before dissecting it. He still didn't see her as a person. "You don't remember me, do you?" Elara's voice came out flat and toneless through her avatar's basic vocalizer. Croft laughed. "Should I? I step on ants every day. I don't memorize each one before I crush it." "Aurelia," she said, "a single drop of wine. You called me disposable." A flicker of recognition crossed his perfect face, followed by amusement. "Oh. That? You're the waitress. My God, all of this, for that? A soiled shirt and a little wounded pride. It's magnificent. The sheer pettiness is almost inspiring." "You destroyed my life," she said, the digital coldness of her voice belying the white-hot fury she felt. "You took my home, my job. You're trying to kill my mother." "I was making a point," Croft countered, waving a dismissive hand. "The world is a system. Some components are essential, others are redundant. You were a rounding error I chose to correct. A lesson in cause and effect. You caused an inconvenience, and the effect was your removal. Clean, efficient. You're about to learn a lesson in cause and effect yourself, Ilara said. Ilara, what are you doing? He's stalling. His security is probably tracing my signal right now. Liam's frantic voice whispered in her ear. You have to act. Liam was right. This wasn't a debate. Croft was a narcissist, and his fatal flaw was his need to gloat, to explain his own genius. While he was monologuing, Ilara had been subtly moving, her grey avatar inching closer to the black sphere of the Nexus. She had one chance. And what are you going to do? Croft scoffed. You're a janitor program in a locked room. You can't touch the Nexus. It only responds to the Genesis key. To me. That's the thing about old service accounts, Mr. Croft, Ilara said, her avatar finally reaching the edge of the sphere. They have privileges people forget about. They can't create or destroy. But they were designed to clean up corrupted files, to run diagnostics, to defragment the core. She placed her hand on the Nexus. A jolt of energy shot through her avatar. The smooth black surface rippled, and lines of code, the very source of Ethelgard, scrolled across its surface. Croft's smug expression vanished, replaced by disbelief, then rage. What are you doing? Stop that. Sentinels, delete her, now. The Sentinels surged forward, but it was too late. Ilara had initiated a master command, a deep-level diagnostic protocol that the Karen account was uniquely privileged to execute. It was a command so fundamental, so archaic, that Croft had never thought to disable it. It was a command to scan and repair all data, starting with the primary user file, the Genesis avatar, Julian Croft. A cage of brilliant blue light erupted around Croft's avatar, trapping him. Alarms blared through the chamber. Ilara, you did it. You've locked him in a diagnostic loop. Liam yelled, his voice a mix of terror and elation. You have root access to his profile. His entire identity, digital and real, is right there. You can do it. Erase him. The code of Julian Croft's existence scrolled before her eyes. It was all there. His biometrics, his financial data, trillions of dollars in assets, stocks, cryptocurrencies, his corporate ownership records, his private medical data, and something else, something she hadn't expected. There was a folder labeled St. Jude's Project. She opened it. Inside were dozens of files, each one a live biometric feed. They were children, critically ill children in a private experimental wing of a hospital. They were all connected to Ethelred life support systems, their treatment funded by an anonymous trust, their vital signs monitored in real time by the very core of Ethelgard she was about to destroy. What is this? She whispered. Croft, trapped in his cage of light, saw the file she had opened. A strange look crossed his face, not fear, but something that almost looked like desperation. Don't be a fool, he snarled. You think this is some secret charity? It's an investment. A long-term study in neural interface therapy. They are my lab rats. But their life support, it's integrated into my own Genesis profile. It's the ultimate security. A dead man's switch. If my profile is deleted, the system shuts down. All of it. The power, the ventilators, everything. You erase me. You murder them all. Ilara stared at the live feeds. A little girl with no hair, her chest rising and falling in a steady, machine-assisted rhythm. A boy, his body frail, a faint smile on his face as he watched a cartoon on a screen. They were real. They were innocent. This was his final, most monstrous contingency. He had tied his own existence to the lives of helpless children. He had made them his human shields. Liam's voice was a ghost in her ear. Oh my God, Ilara, he's not lying. The dependencies are hard-coded. It's all linked. If you delete him, the life support fails. There's no override. She looked from the children's faces to Croft's snarling, trapped avatar. She had come for revenge. She had come to erase the monster who had tried to erase her. But to do it, she would have to become a monster herself. He was daring her to. He was betting his life that she, the disposable waitress, still had a conscience he had long since abandoned. The power to delete God was in her hands, but the price was the souls of innocents. The chamber thrummed with the silent scream of the alarms. Croft's avatar watched her, a triumphant sneer returning to his lips. He had won. He had presented her with an impossible choice, a moral checkmate. "What will it be, waitress?" he taunted from his cage of light. "Will you be their savior, or will you be their executioner? Your one chance to destroy me, and you have to sacrifice a ward of sick children to do it." The irony is delicious. Ilara's mind raced. He was right. She couldn't delete him. She couldn't live with that. But she couldn't let him win either. To retreat now would be to sign her own death warrant and her mother's. He would never stop hunting her. He left no other options, Ilara. Liam's voice was grim. "It's a perfect trap." But Liam was wrong. Croft, in his arrogance, had assumed her goal was binary, destruction or failure. He couldn't conceive of a third option. He saw the world in assets to be acquired and threats to be eliminated. He had forgotten the power of creation, of rewriting the rules. "You're right, Mr. Croft," Ilara said, her voice steady. She turned her back on his avatar and faced the scrolling code of the Nexus. "I can't delete you. It wouldn't be justice. It would just be your kind of business." Her grey fingers began to move across the holographic interface, not with the slash-and-burn motions of deletion, but with the careful, precise art of an editor. She wasn't pressing delete. She was pressing find and replace. "What are you doing?" Croft demanded, his voice losing its confident edge. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work. My core code is immutable." "Your code isn't immutable," Ilara countered without looking at him. "You just have the highest permissions. But this old diagnostic program, it runs at a deeper level. It doesn't ask for permission. It just fixes things." First, she found the Janus file that had ruined her life. With a few keystrokes, she reversed it. She didn't just restore her old identity, she improved it. She gave herself a perfect credit score, glowing letters of recommendation from every CEO in the Fortune 500, and a clean slate. Next, she went into his financial data. Trillions of dollars, a meaningless string of numbers to a man who could have anything. She couldn't just take it, that would be theft. So she didn't. Instead, she wrote a new script, a simple, elegant little program that would, upon the diagnostic's completion, execute a single command: to transfer 99.9% of all of Julian Croft's liquid assets into a newly created, irrevocable blind trust. She named it the Sarah Vance Foundation for Victims of Corporate Abuse. Its first act would be to secure lifetime, top-tier medical care for her mother. Its second act would be to fund the St. Jude's Project in perpetuity, severing its connection to Croft's profile. The children would be safe. "Stop!" Croft roared, rattling the bars of his digital prison. "You can't do that. That's my money, my power." "It was never yours," Ilara said calmly. "You just held it. Now it's going to people who need it." Finally, she turned to his most precious possession, Ethelred Industries itself. She located the digital ownership certificates, the very proof of his control over his global empire. She couldn't transfer them to herself, but she could transfer them. With a final decisive command, she initiated a transfer of all voting shares and ownership rights to a new entity, a board of directors composed of the top 3 most respected, non-profit ethics watchdogs in the world. She didn't erase Julian Croft. She did something far more cruel. She left him intact, but she took away everything that made him who he was. She left the man, but deleted the billionaire. She took his money, his company, his power, and his legacy. With her work done, she turned back to him. "The diagnostic is complete," she said. "I'm releasing the lock." The cage of light dissolved. Croft's avatar stood there, shaking with a rage so profound it seemed to make the very air of the Nexus tremble. He was a god, stripped of his divinity, a king with no crown, no subjects, and no kingdom. He was just a man in a digital suit. "You," he seethed, the word a venomous dart. "I will find you. I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I will—" "You will do nothing," Ilara interrupted, "because as of this moment, you have no resources, no access, no authority. Your biometrics are still tied to this avatar, but this avatar is now just a user, with no special privileges. You're a guest in your own world. Enjoy your retirement." She severed the connection. The world of Ethelgard vanished in a flash of white. The smell of dust and ozone returned. She was back in the utility closet on the 44th floor, the clunky headset feeling heavy on her brow. She ripped it off, her hands shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline crash was instantaneous and brutal, leaving her limbs feeling like lead. The distant wail of sirens was much closer now, a shrill promise of capture. She packed the laptop with frantic, clumsy movements, shoved it into the cleaning cart under a pile of dirty rags, and slipped out of the closet. She didn't run. She walked, pushing the cart, her body language screaming boredom and routine, a janitor at the end of a long shift. She passed 2 armed security guards sprinting in the opposite direction. They didn't give her a second glance. She was invisible again, and for the first time she was grateful for it. Back in the stale, caffeinated air of Liam's apartment, the sun was beginning to stain the grey sky. They didn't speak. They just watched the news on one of his monitors, the sound muted. The story was breaking worldwide. Markets in turmoil. As tech mogul Julian Croft liquidates entire fortune in shocking philanthropic move. His face was everywhere, a portrait of a smiling saint. Pundits were calling it an act of unprecedented altruism, speculating about a spiritual awakening or a secret illness. The world was celebrating the man, even as the woman he tried to destroy had been his undoing. The irony was so thick she could taste it. "They think he's a hero," Ilara murmured, watching the crawling headline. "For now," Liam said, finally looking away from the screen. His eyes were dark with exhaustion, but a fierce pride burned in them. "You did it, Ilara." "We did it," she corrected. She looked at him then, truly looked. "Liam, why? Why did you risk everything for me? We were friends in high school, but this is something else." He was silent for a long moment, tracing patterns on his dusty desk. "Because I made a promise," he said softly. To the first person Croft erased. He swiveled his chair to face her. "I wasn't just a freelance coder, Ilara. I was one of the original architects of Ethelgard. I worked with Croft, back when it was just an idea, a dream. He was brilliant, a true visionary, but he was also a monster." Liam's face hardened. "My partner, Anya, she was the lead ethics programmer. She designed the safeguards, the protocols, to prevent a system like Ethelgard from being used to control people. Croft saw her work not as a safety feature, but as a limitation. He wanted total control. They fought, he fired her, and then he used an early version of the Janus system on her, wiped her professional credentials, accused her of stealing intellectual property. He ruined her. She couldn't take it. She took her own life a year later." The confession hung in the air, heavy and cold. "I quit the next day," Liam continued, his voice thick with grief and anger. "But before I left, I buried a key deep in the system. A ghost account. Karen 738, a way to ferry a soul into the underworld to judge its king. I've been waiting for years, watching, looking for someone with nothing left to lose, someone with the courage to use it. Then you walked through my door. You weren't just a victim, Ilara. You were the answer to a prayer." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. This was never just about a drop of wine. It was the culmination of a decade of silent, simmering rage. She was not the first, only the last. Meanwhile, in a penthouse overlooking the city he no longer owned, Julian Croft was discovering the true meaning of the word disposable. He awoke not to the gentle chimes of his smart home, but to a blaring generic alarm from his bedside terminal. "Access denied," it flashed in stark red letters. He tried to dismiss it. Access denied. He tried to access his portfolio. Access denied. He tried to call security. The line was dead. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection a mask of pure fury. He was still in his tower, but it was no longer his. He was a squatter. He picked up a priceless crystal sculpture and hurled it at the wall, the sound of it shattering a pale imitation of the cataclysm in his soul. He screamed until his throat was raw, a primal sound of a god cast out of heaven. He tried to go to the authorities to report the grandest theft in human history. He walked into the precinct, demanding to see the chief, announcing himself as Julian Croft. The desk sergeant ran his name. The system, his system, flagged him. Credit score, 320. Sealed juvenile record, aggravated assault. Current status, unemployed. Assets, frozen pending fraud investigation. He was a glitch, a rounding error. The police escorted the raving, impeccably dressed madman out onto the street. His final act was one of desperation. He logged into Ethelgard, his last remaining link to the world he had built. But he didn't appear on his throne in the Citadel. He materialized on the Obsidian Promenade like any other common user. His godlike avatar was gone, replaced by a default model, as grey and featureless as the one Elara had worn. He was a nobody. The other perfect avatars glided past him, not even seeing him. He was just part of the scenery. Days later, Elara stood by her mother's bedside in a private room at the finest medical facility in the country. The Sarah Vance Foundation had taken care of everything. Her mother was sleeping peacefully, the lines of pain on her face softened for the first time in years. Liam walked in, holding out a tablet. On the screen was a news article. The new ethics board of Ethelred Industries had released a statement. During a routine audit, they had discovered an encrypted file left by the previous owner. It was a log file detailing the illegal and malicious use of a reputation-destroying software called Janus, specifically its deployment against a waitress named Elara Vance. The log was digitally signed with Julian Croft's immutable private key. A full-scale criminal investigation was now underway. "You didn't just take his money," Liam said, his voice filled with awe. "You left a signed confession. You gave them the gun, the bullet, and the fingerprint." "He called it a lesson in cause and effect," Elara said, looking out the window at the sprawling city. "The cause was a drop of wine. The effect was his removal, clean, efficient." She was no longer Jane Doe, the ghost. She was Elara Vance, the architect. She hadn't just fought the system, she had corrected it. She had found a bug in reality itself, a man who thought he was a god, and with a quiet, steely resolve, she had patched him out of existence.